This fall, my sermon series is based on our principles. We looked at the seventh one, we looked at the first one, and today we're going to explore the second one, which is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I have a story I'd like to share with you to introduce this principle. Here's a picture of my son John. I now have middle-aged children. I told my mom one time, I said, "Oh my goodness, my children are middle-aged." She says, "How do you think that makes me feel?" So I was out visiting my son John in Colorado this summer and climbing mountains. We took that picture on the beautiful Colorado mountains. But John shared a story with me recently, and I'm going to share it with you. He said that when they were little, I have two sons, John and Fred. He said that his dad and I would often take them on trips, and sometimes we'd go to big cities. Now this would sometimes be a vacation, or maybe they were going with us to a conference or something, but we would go to a big city. And he said when we got there, we'd check into the hotel, but before we went out, we would always give them the talk, the big city talk. And he said it was very serious. We would sit them down and say, "Now this is not Statesboro, and it's different here. And you need to be very careful and stay close to us. And when we're crossing the street, we always need to hold hands, and we need to be just awfully careful. And if you do, somehow we happen to get separated, you need to find a police officer and tell them that your parents got lost or whatever." But and we had all these little things we needed to tell them. But be very serious about this. This place is not Statesboro. And one of the things we would tell them is, now you're going to see a lot of people along the streets, a lot of homeless people, and they're going to be calling out to you to help them and to give them something. But there are too many of them, and we really can't help them all, and this is just the way big cities are, and it's too bad, but we really don't know these folks, and you don't really need to be talking to strangers, we've told you not to talk to so just stay with us, and we'll just walk on. That's what he said we said. I guess we did. So, he said it bothered him at first to walk by folks that were calling out to him. But he said he did. He followed his parents' instructions. And he said after we got to where we were going and we get to ride the elevator up to the top of the tall building or whatever, maybe the amusement park we were going to, wherever we were, we would be having a good time and he'd forget about it. So that was okay. And he said he continued to do this, follow our instructions that he'd learned from when he was a small boy into adulthood. Until one day he was in San Francisco, and he was going through San Francisco, looking straight ahead, not making eye contact, as he was instructed. And he said there was a homeless man that was calling out to him for attention, for him to pay him some attention. John said he was just going to keep on walking right by. But he said that he came to an intersection, and the light was red, and he had to stop. He couldn't go forward. He had to just stop there. And the man was standing there nearby, still talking to him. John still looking straight ahead. And then the man said, "Oh, I know what's wrong. Perhaps you don't speak English. Perhaps you don't understand what I'm saying." Very gently, very calmly, sweetly. And John said he just couldn't do it anymore. He had to turn around. And he turned around and interacted with the person and had a conversation. He saw him as a human being and realized what a connection they had. Now, John at that time probably didn't even have any money in his pocket, didn't have a lot of means to help the person. But he did have the ability to see him and to listen to him and to recognize his humanity. And what a gift even that was. The Dr. Seuss story we heard, we kept hearing this phrase a couple of times, a person's a person, no matter how small. Now, by small, I don't mean really lesser than or littler or lesser than. I mean someone that we don't want to see for whatever reason. That we diminish to smallness in our minds, in our actions, in our inactions. Our second principle confronts us with how we should interact with others. It moves on beyond the inherent worth and dignity and says, how do you act? How do you interact with other people? And it says we should do this with justice. We should do this with equity. We should do this with compassion. That's how we interact with others. I thought it'd be good for us to unpack this a little bit. Unpack what do they mean, or what do we mean by this when we say that we have justice, that we lift up justice, equity, and compassion in all human relations? Well, let's take the first one, justice. You know, justice is symbolized often by Lady Justice. Here's a couple of images of Lady Justice. Lady Justice typically is holding scales from her left hand. This is found a lot of times in front of courthouses. You'll see Lady Justice there. Lady Justice is supposedly measuring the strengths the case's support, looking at both sides, seeing how it weighs out. She's also has a double-edged sword, symbolizing the power of reason on one side and justice on the other, and that's what she's going to wield, that double-edged sword, reason, justice, as she stands there. Now, some of the later ones, beginning in the 15th century, put a blindfold on her. And it wasn't on the earlier statues, but it was actually taken from even older goddesses that had similar symbolism. But in the 15th century, you saw blindfolds put on justice. And perhaps the reason people needed to put blindfolds on justice is they realized that justice was looking at everything carefully, had a lot of prejudices, or at least that's what was going on in the courthouse. So the symbolism is that justice should be blind. Justice should be without prejudice. Plato talked about justice. He related it to just about everything else about one's life and through one's life. He said that to be just, one must balance the many principles of the soul. To be just, we have to keep them in balance. So we see that justice is about the balance in our lives. George Eliot said, justice is like the kingdom of God. It is not without us as a fact. It is within us as a great yearning. Justice is a yearning for fairness. And that's what I tend to see justice as too, for me at least. Tell a lot of folks when they say, I have these different titles people can put in front of my name if they want to. And people will say, what do you want me to call you? And I say, well, just Jane is fine. So a lot of times I refer to myself as Just Jane. Just Jane. But I also call my blog, which I've got to update, put my more recent sermons or links to what Costi is doing for me here. I call it Just Jane. And of course, I want it to have a double meaning. I hope it to be simple, just Jane. But I strive to be just. I strive to be fair. I don't always reach through. I strive to be righteous. So I want to be just Jane. And this second principle encourages us to reach to that. Then there's equity. There are a lot of definitions of equity, because equity is used in a lot of different places. You have equity in your home, so it's used in real estate, it's used financially in other ways, a lot of different definitions. But this one seems to mirror what we affirm in our principle. This definition says, equity is defined as the quality of being fair, unbiased, and just. In other words, equity involves ensuring that everyone has access to the resources, opportunities, power, and responsibility they need to reach their full, healthy potential, as well as making changes so that unfair differences may be understood and addressed. This is a good definition for us, I think, of equity. Now, equity and equality, equal, all come from the same root. And you hear equality a lot in some of our government papers and things, talk about equality. But we use the term equity instead of equality. Why do we do that? Why equity rather than equality? I think this visual kind of explains it better than words do. Here is equality with these kids trying to see the ball game. They have fences that they're standing on. They're looking over the fence. They have boxes they're standing on. And if somebody was trying to help them and they wanted to help them, they wanted them to help them equally, you see, they'd give them all a box. But does that provide the same opportunities for all? Of course not. Because we don't all come with the same things. We all have different struggles. We all are different. And if they want those three young guys all to be able to look over the fence, they're not going to treat them equally. They're going to treat them with some equity so that they can all have that opportunity. And eventually, if they all have the same opportunities, maybe they can be treated more equally because they will maybe have some of the same gifts. And maybe the little boy will grow up to be a little bit bigger, that kind of thing. But right now, they need to be treated differently, but equitably. And that's what we try to do very often with many things in our congregation, for instance. Right now, during this month, this is our month, our stewardship campaign month. We're hoping that you're turning in your pledge information and your volunteer information. And if you haven't, put it in the offering plate, or you can mail it in to our post office box, and Bill's collecting those. We're going to have a grand party in a couple of weeks where we're going to celebrate 30th birthday party for our congregation and celebrate. But when we ask for your gifts, both your gifts of money, financial gifts, and your gifts of time and talent, we're not expecting everybody to give equally. Because we all have different incomes, we have different gifts that we have, different talents, things that we can do. We have different struggles in our homes, things that maybe we're having to do that others aren't having to do. So and some of us are very blessed. So we're asking not for equal kinds of sharing, but sharing that's more equitable so that we can provide the same kinds of opportunities for all of our members and friends and reach out into the community. So that's another example of equity. And then there's compassion. Now, the etymology of compassion comes from Latin, and the co-part is together or with, and the last part, the passion, is not like the kind of passion you see in some kind of romantic film when you see two people kissing passionately. It doesn't mean that. It's the same word that the word patient comes from. It relates to suffering. So it kind of means coming from co-suffering, suffering with another person. Now, it's also more involved in simple empathy. When we talk about compassion here, it commonly gives rise to the active desire not only that we're suffering with you, or as Bill Clinton said, I feel your pain. We want to do more than that, more than feel your pain. We want to help alleviate suffering, and we hope others will help us do that as well. Actually, we're not the only ones. Most religions emphasize compassion. Some people say that's the word we should lift up more than, you see me wear my love pin. There's some folks that think, well, love is used for so many different things, including romantic love, and that maybe what we need to lift up is compassion. My feeling is it doesn't have to be either or. We can lift both of them up. I like love, but I like compassion too. Compassion seems to be something that's hardwired in us. We have evolved it. As you look down through the different kinds of life forms, and you get to mammals, you see more of it. You see the little mammal crying out and the mother going over to feed the animal. So we have evolved this. It helped us survive. If we had not had compassion, we would not have survived. But it's also taught. It's hardwired and it's taught. I should go back to that before I show you those monkeys. It's taught because they've done studies on this too. They show little children lots of cartoons that are really violent and stuff like that, and they're doing bad things, and they let them go to the playground, and what do you think happens? The little kids act more like that. When they show films where people are more compassionate and are doing more compassionate things, not just kids, but adults as well, they tend to react in that. You can learn it. We can learn it, and that's one reason we need to come here together and have our children go to RE. It can be learned as well. Now, I thought this was a very interesting study, though, to show how it's not just in human beings. These are some of rhesus monkeys, and they did some things with these monkeys where they had it where they could pull a rope and get food. So they learned that first. They taught them that. Pull the rope, you get the food, right? But then they introduced this shock kind of thing. And what happened was, if you pull the rope with you had a, kind of like you have maybe you have a housemate or a roommate, you had a monkey mate in there with you in the same cage. If you pull the rope, your monkey mate got shocked. You got your food, but your monkey mate got shocked and cried out with pain. And what they found that with many of these monkeys, they would rather starve themselves than to keep pulling that rope and watch their monkey mate cry out with pain. So it's not just humans that have compassion. We've evolved it, but it's other life forms as well. But our principle, now later on we have a principle that talks about the interdependent web of all, we get to the whole bigger picture. But this second principle is talking specifically about human relations, how we treat other human beings. Some folks say, well, really all we need is the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. We were all brought up hearing that. Follow the golden rule. Follow the golden rule. And you may have heard or seen these pictures where most religions have something like the golden rule, most major religions. Christianity says, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Confucianism, do not do to others what you would like yourself. Then there will be no resentment against you, either in the family or in the state. I'm not going to read every one of these. I'll show them to you. So we have Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Judaism. I like the last part of this one. After it says the thing that's kind of like the golden rule, it says, this is the entire law, all the rest is commentary. Taoism. Zoroastrianism. So in all these different major religions, there's something like the golden rule. Is the golden rule the ultimate universal principle then that is everywhere worldwide? Is that everywhere? Well, in my research I found there are actually some societies that do not honor it, but the major religions and the major ethical systems do. It's usually stated, as you read through those, you may have noticed it's usually stated in negative terms. And that's easier to reinforce, but and enforce. You know, if you got two children, it might be easier to say, don't touch each other, rather than say, be polite, be kind to one another. But if you get, don't touch each other, that's something, okay, that's a don't. That's easier sometimes to enforce than the positive. But the positive, it's not necessarily the best way to, the negative is not the best way to look at it all the time. So I like the positive as well. It comes from a personal perspective, though, that may not be what the other needs or wants. That's a little problem with the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, what you want may not be what they want. Greg reminds me of this all the time. He says, that's a Jainism, that's a Jainism. What's a Jainism? Well, I'll come up with something, I'll say, well, this, and I'll say, this is the way it should be done because this is that. He said, that's a Jainism. That's how you would do it. That's what you would like. But that's not what everybody would like. And you're thinking about it from only your own perspective. That's what the golden rule says to do, but the golden rule may not be good enough. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes it's not enough. Some people say instead we should have the platinum rule. Got gold, platinum's supposed to be worth a little more. Do unto others as they would have done unto them. Do unto others as they would have done unto them. What do they want? And that's what you should do to them. Now this is a lofty ideal and may not be best all the time either. Because maybe what they want done unto them may not be the best for all. And that's where equity comes in. In any case, I think our principle is gold enough, platinum enough, maybe even diamond enough for us. I like it. Please say it with me. We affirm and promote justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. That's what I've been trying to do a lot of this week. Wednesday night, I was speaking at Georgia Southern and to the Gay Straight Alliance and a lot of their visitors there and the Russell Union, trying to look back at history and have folks understand about same-sex marriages and holy unions from early Christianity to present day. So I was busy with that, preparing for that, and then the next day, I got involved with the NAACP. I consider this, by the way, folks, me representing you at a lot of this stuff that you can't be at. So I consider this part of my job, you know? This is part of my ministry. But we had a grand time at NAACP, October 8th through 11th. It ended this morning, but with the speakers there were just fabulous. And I had part of it myself that I had to share some things and sit on some panels. But they had a real interfaith panel this time. It wasn't just Christianity. We had a Islamic sister, and we had Baha'i, and we Unitarian Universalists, and Jim Key, our moderator, was there. We had invited the rabbi, but he didn't quite make it there, but we had a very, very, very good panel. So we were trying to do the kinds of things to learn about how we relate to one another. Francis Johnson, my good friend, and he's my friend, my colleague, my ministerial colleague, the president of the NAACP Association. He's also my lawyer. But Francis Johnson, I was so proud of him. You would have been proud of him too. He's the president of the state NAACP. But he stood there and made some very bold remarks to them that did not get hand claps. Except for me, I'm a woman. Bold remarks, how we had to get in the intersections and we had to work for all oppressions. We had to fight for the rights of LGBTQ folks. We had to fight for the rights of the undocumented. And we had to do it together. And the NAACP had to get involved with those as well. Now, he says, as Georgians, we have united to demand pro-labor, anti-poverty, economic sustainability, well-funded quality public education for all, comprehensive health care and environmental justice across all the state's communities, criminal justice reform that ensures equality under the law for every person, regardless of race, class, creed, documentation status, or sexual orientation, and to protect and expand voting rights for traditionally marginalized peoples. So those were all the kinds of things that he was lifting up. Now, he was the mayor of Whoville. He was lifting this up and he was saying, make your voices heard, trying to get some energy with us to make your voices heard and be the voice for others who've been silenced. Another cheerleader that was doing that, another mayor of Whoville, was this man, Reverend Winford Hope. He spoke at the mass meeting. You see, he has these crazy glasses with the light shining. He was doing that because he was trying to motivate us about a charge to keep and getting that energy out and being able to see some things. And he was pulling out all kinds of things out from under the pulpit with little object lessons. One of the things he pulled out was his cell phone. He said, this won't work by itself. Sometimes it won't. Sometimes I got it, I can't call on it, can't take a picture, can't do anything. Because I have to do what? I have to charge it. It doesn't have any charge. So I have to get the charge. That's why you come to these meetings. That's why you come to church. You come to church to get recharged so that you can go out and do those things. You can go out. So he also was a mayor, banging on that drum, said, charge it up, energize yourself, go forth. Francis Johnson was also that mayor of Whoville, making their voices, telling us that we need to do that too. But I know also that sometimes I need to do what my son John did, and what Horton did, and what others did. Stop. Listen. Perk up my ears. Just hear what's going on. Now, John had to stop because he was at the intersection with that hand up. Stoplight. Made him stop. Some things make me stop. If I see those difficult pictures I showed last time I was here, or see something happening and I witness it, it makes me stop. But also I need to recognize some stoplights for myself that make me stop and listen as well. And one of those that I've come to recognize, I recognize as hand up, stop, Jane, is when something is said or done that I immediately emotionally go to the point where I want to counter it, argue it, defend, get defensive. When that happens to me, I'm thinking, you're missing something, Jane. There's something you're missing. You need to stop and listen. So I'm trying to let that be a stoplight for me. And I'm looking for others as well. think of them what they are for you. What are some times, things that happen that maybe you better just stop and listen? Because you see, sometimes I'm like Horton. Sometimes I'm a hoot. And sometimes I act like that mean kangaroo. But I stop and I listen. Because, after all, a person's a person, no matter how small. Amen. Blessed be.